One of my biggest fears when we began the journey of facing mom's decline with dementia was my fear of forgetting who she is. I had grown up my whole life knowing my mom a certain way, knowing her personality quirks, her love, her laughter, the things that made her happy, the things that brought her joy, the things that made her laugh, the way she held the family together, the way she loved and interacted with Dad, and the way she loved and interacted with us. And so I was shocked to see just how quickly her illness changed all of that. This new version of her that we saw day in and day out. The personality changes in the beginning, declining to where she is now, just a shell of her former self. I just could not recognize this new person as the mother that I knew, and because I was seeing it day in and day out, I was worried that I would begin slowly forgetting who she was. But as I've been sharing stories about her love for our family and her love for me and how she raised me, it really has helped so much, and the overwhelming support has just been incredible. And on last week's video, discussing whether or not I was exploiting her illness for views, I received this incredible comment, talking about how sharing these videos and these stories unflattens the face of this disease and tells a story of a woman deserving of such love and care. And that's all I really want. For everybody to know my mom the way that I know her, to know her love, and for me not to forget her love and not to forget who she really is. You see, even from my earliest memories, that's all I can remember. Just how much love Mom had for our family and for me, and just how much love she had for everybody around her. I remember pretty early on when we had first moved to the States and Mom didn't have her license and couldn't drive yet. She'd always take my brother and I on the city bus, dropping some coins into the fare collector, and that was my favorite part, watching the coins just disappear into the machine, and then going down the aisle to find an empty pair of those blue plastic and vinyl wrap bench seats. I'd always loved sitting with my mom and just observing what passengers would get on and get off at each stop, and counting the number of stops before we would get off to go home or get to wherever we needed to be. I remember one day in particular, a homeless man had gotten on the bus and didn't have enough money for his bus fare, and the bus driver was telling him that he had to get off, and so I didn't quite understand when Mom got up and used some of our bus fare and paid for his. At the time, it was just strange to me, and I remember being worried about whether or not we'd have enough to be able to make it home. But that's just how Mom always was. She was never afraid to love on anyone, no matter who they were. Even when it came to those who may have seemed especially difficult to love, Mom would always seem to have an extra amount of patience and love for them in particular. I remember the very first time we moved homes as teenagers and the neighbors' kids came out and saw us moving in. I don't know if they were just trying to be funny or if they hadn't really been exposed to very many Asians, but they started greeting us with konnichiwa. Naturally, my brother and I felt disrespected and we were angry and ready to fire back. But I remember Mom easing our anger and just reminding us to be patient with them and to love on them because they might not know what they're saying or doing. And there was always that type of slow to anger and non-judgmental attitude that she would use to approach anyone, even my friends. There was a period in high school where I wasn't hanging out with the most traditionally behaved group of people. And I remember one instance in particular when a group of my friends came over after school to go to a park near my house to smoke weed. And so on that day, for whatever reason, one of my friends got extremely dizzy after that session, and he came back to my house and ended up throwing up in the sink. I still remember my mom coming in and seeing it, and then immediately cleaning up the sink after him. Now thinking back, I never joined my friends in that activity even though we hung out all the time, but my mom didn't know that. And even after that event, I remember her having a conversation with me and then simply telling me to please be careful and to tell my friend to be careful as well. Never once telling me to stop hanging out with them or telling me that they couldn't come over anymore, but instead still opening up our home and still welcoming my friends as best as she could. Even when it came to people who we might even consider our enemies, Mom continued to remind us to be patient and love them as well. Even just a few years ago, I remember my brother and his then girlfriend, we were all at the bowling alley together. Over in the lane next to us, there was a large group of very rowdy people who eventually interrupted us to ask us a series of very strange questions. The questions included asking us how the pin setters worked, how to set the names on the scorecards, and overall just a bunch of very specific and random questions about the bowling alley. Thinking back, the questions were really meant to divert our attention away from what was happening, because only a few minutes later we realized that my brother's girlfriend's purse was missing. It had been sitting on the table between the two lanes, but all we could do was just ask them if they had seen it, to which they responded no. And so we eventually left the bowling alley without ever recovering her purse. I remember at home being absolutely livid, speculating on what had happened and talking about what I should have done to that group of people instead. And I remember it was then that Mom reminded me that it was natural to be angry, but instead what we should do in this situation is pray for them. And that instead of anger and hatred, that we should feel sorry for them and we should pray for them because we don't know what they've gone through to make them act in that way. And so I could just go on and on with more stories like this, but this is just my mom's heart, and this is just the love that she's lived her entire life. And so just like the comment of unflattening the face of this disease, I just want to thank all of you guys for allowing me the opportunity to share these stories with you, and on this very special Mother's Day, reminding me that she is not defined by this illness, and that dementia and how she appears now is not who she is, but she's defined by the love that she's lived and her whole life spent sharing it. So even though I wish with all my heart that she would recover and get better, although it continues to be this steady decline, this love that she has and who she is now reflected in me. And although this may look like defeat, it really isn't, because I now carry her love.